1 minute ago, something absolutely unprecedented just happened on live television that has sent shockwaves through Westminster and across the entire world. Elon Musk, the most influential entrepreneur of our generation, the man who revolutionised electric vehicles, space exploration and social media, just appeared on British television for what was supposed to be a straightforward interview about technology and innovation. But what actually happened was a complete and total destruction of Keir Starmer and everything his government represents. This wasn't a casual criticism. This wasn't polite disagreement. This was a systematic, devastating, point-by-point demolition of Starmer's policies, his character, and his fitness to lead, delivered with such precision, such factual firepower, and such moral authority that the studio went completely silent. The interviewer didn't know how to respond. The production team froze. And millions of viewers watching live witnessed the most brutal political takedown ever broadcast on British television. Musk didn't just criticise Starmer's policies, he exposed the authoritarian impulse behind them. He revealed the economic ignorance that guides them. He demonstrated the technological illiteracy that undermines them. And he connected all of it to a broader pattern of Western governments run by people who fundamentally don't understand the modern world and who are desperately clinging to control through censorship and regulation because they've lost the ability to lead through competence and vision. The comparisons to Starmer were implicit at first, but then Musk made them explicit. He named Britain's Prime Minister directly. He cited specific policies. He quoted Starmer's own words back to him and showed why they revealed someone completely unfit to govern in the 21st century. And he did all of this with the calm, factual precision of someone who has built multiple world-changing companies and who understands technology, economics, and human nature at a level that career politicians like Starmer simply cannot match. The intellectual gap was so obvious, so enormous, that everyone watching understood immediately. This is what happens when someone who has actually accomplished things in the real world confronts a politician who has spent his entire career in the protected bubble of government and law, never building anything, beta anything, never creating value, never taking the risks that teach you how the world actually works. The moment that's already going absolutely viral, the clip that's been viewed millions of times in the past hour, came when the interviewer tried to defend Starmer by suggesting his government was just trying to protect people from online harm through the Online Safety Act. Musk's response was devastating. He explained in simple terms that you cannot protect people by taking away their freedom to speak and think. He pointed out that every authoritarian regime in history has justified censorship by claiming they were protecting people from dangerous ideas. He noted that the people who are most eager to control speech are always the ones who are most afraid of free debate because they know their ideas cannot survive scrutiny. And then he looked directly at the camera and said something that has already become one of the most quoted statements in British political discourse. He said, "Your Prime Minister is not protecting you from harm. He's protecting himself from accountability. And any leader who needs to silence his critics to maintain power is not a leader. He's a tyrant in training." The studio went absolutely dead silent. You could hear the uncomfortable shifting in seats. The camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. The interviewer's face was frozen in shock because nobody on British television, especially not someone with Musk's global influence and credibility, has ever said something that direct and that damning about a sitting Prime Minister. And the thing is, Musk was just getting started. What followed was another 10 minutes of the most comprehensive demolition of Starmer's entire approach to governance that anyone has delivered. On economic policy, Musk explained why Starmer's approach to taxation and regulation will drive investment and innovation out of Britain. On technology policy, he revealed how Britain is falling behind in artificial intelligence, renewable energy and space technology because the government doesn't understand these fields and regulates them based on fear rather than knowledge. On free speech, he made the moral case that freedom of expression is not just a nice principle, but the foundation of everything that makes Western civilization worth defending. And through all of it, the implicit and sometimes explicit message was clear. Keir Starmer is exactly the kind of mediocre, controlling, backward-looking politician that's holding Britain back from the future it could have. The political implications are absolutely massive. When someone with Musk's influence, credibility and global platform delivers this kind of critique, it doesn't just stay in Britain, it spreads worldwide. It affects how international investors view Britain. It influences how tech companies decide where to locate operations. It shapes how young, talented people think about whether Britain is a place where innovation and freedom are valued or where bureaucracy and control dominate. And domestically, it gives enormous ammunition to everyone who has been criticising Starmer. Opposition parties are already sharing clips. Reform UK is using Musk's statements in their messaging. Even some Labour MPs are reportedly privately agreeing with much of what Musk said, though they won't say so publicly. The government's response has been predictably defensive and inadequate. A brief statement from Downing Street dismissed Musk's comments as uninformed opinions from someone who doesn't understand British politics. But that response actually makes things worse because it proves exactly what Musk was saying, that Starmer and his team live in a bubble where they dismiss any criticism as illegitimate rather than engaging with the substance. Stay with me because what I'm about to reveal about exactly what Musk said, why it's so devastating and what it means for Britain's future will show you why this moment is being called the most significant political intervention by a business leader in modern British history. Let me walk you through the full context of how this interview came about and why what happened was so much more significant than just a celebrity criticising a politician. Because understanding the background makes Musk's intervention even more powerful and reveals why it resonated so deeply with millions of people. Elon Musk was in London for a series of meetings related to his various business interests. Tesla has significant operations in Europe. SpaceX is working with European partners on space projects. And X, formerly Twitter, has had ongoing tensions with European governments over content moderation and free speech issues. A major British broadcaster approached Musk's team about doing an interview focused on technology, innovation and the future of various industries. It was supposed to be the kind of forward-looking conversation that Musk often does, discussing electric vehicles, artificial intelligence, space exploration and similar topics. The interview was scheduled for live broadcast during evening prime time, guaranteeing a large audience. So Musk agreed, apparently viewing it as an opportunity to discuss his company's work and his vision for the future. Nobody expected it to become a direct political confrontation with the British government. But that's exactly what happened, and the turning point came when the interviewer asked Musk about X's relationship with various governments that have been pushing for stronger content moderation and regulation. This was a natural question given ongoing debates about online safety legislation in multiple countries, including Britain's Online Safety Act. And Musk's response opened the door to everything that followed. Musk started by explaining his philosophy on free speech, which is that it's the foundation of all other freedoms, and that any society that loses free speech will eventually lose everything else worth having. He pointed out that throughout history, the people who wanted to control speech were never the good guys. They were always the people in power who were afraid of criticism, afraid of ideas that challenged their authority, afraid of open debate that might expose their failures. He noted that protecting speech you agree with is easy and meaningless. The test of commitment to free speech is whether you protect speech you disagree with, speech that offends you, speech that challenges your beliefs. Musk described the act as one of the most dangerous pieces of legislation in the democratic world because it gives government enormous power to decide what speech is acceptable while using vague standards that guarantee arbitrary enforcement. He explained that when laws prohibit speech that could cause harm without defining harm clearly, what you've really done is give government the power to ban any speech that makes people uncomfortable or that challenges official narratives. That's not protecting people, that's controlling them. And it's exactly the kind of thing that authoritarian governments do when they're losing legitimacy and need to suppress criticism to maintain power. The interviewer tried to push back, suggesting that some content online genuinely is harmful and that government has a responsibility to protect citizens, especially children, from dangerous material. Musk's response was patient but firm. He distinguished between speech and action, pointing out that genuine threats, harassment and exploitation are already illegal and can be prosecuted under existing laws. What the Online Safety Act does is go much further, criminalising expression of opinions and sharing of information that authorities simply don't like. And that's when Musk brought Starmer into the conversation directly. He said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but capturing the essence, that when you look at who is pushing these censorship laws most aggressively, it's always leaders who are facing legitimate criticism for their failures and who would rather silence critics than address the criticisms. Britain's current government has broken promises, pursued policies that significant portions of the population oppose, and lost public trust. And rather than changing course or defending their positions through open debate, they're trying to make it legally dangerous to criticise them online. That's not governance, that's authoritarianism. And the fact that it's happening in Britain, a country with such a strong historical commitment to free expression, is particularly troubling. The interviewer was clearly uncomfortable at this point and tried to steer the conversation back to less confrontational territory by asking about technology policy more broadly. But Musk had clearly decided this was an opportunity to say things that needed to be said, and he wasn't going to let the moment pass. He pivoted to discussing how Britain is handling the technological revolution, and his assessment was damning. He pointed out that Britain has enormous advantages in terms of educated population, strong universities, historical culture of innovation, and English language advantage. These should make Britain a leader in the technologies that will define the 21st century, like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, biotechnology, and space exploration. But instead, Britain is falling behind countries that have governments which understand these technologies and create regulatory environments that encourage rather than stifle innovation. Musk gave specific examples. In AI development, Britain has brilliant researchers, but the companies commercializing AI are predominantly American and Chinese, because those countries have governments that understand technology matters and regulate with precision rather than fear. In space technology, Britain has capabilities but lacks the policy framework and government support that countries like the US provide through agencies like NASA and through regulation that enables private space companies to operate. In electric vehicle adoption, Britain set targets but didn't build the charging infrastructure or create the market conditions necessary to meet those targets, creating a gap between ambition and execution that frustrates consumers and manufacturers. In every case, Musk argued, the problem is the same. Politicians who make sweeping promises without understanding the technological and economic realities of implementing them, who regulate based on worst-case fears rather than understanding trade-offs, and who view technology companies as threats to be controlled rather than partners in building the future. And then Musk made his most cutting observation. He said that the problem with career politicians like Starmer is that they've never built anything. They've never taken an idea from concept to reality. They've never risked their own resources on a vision that might fail. They've never had to meet payroll, satisfy customers, or compete in a market where failure means you go out of business. They've spent their entire careers in the protected world of government, law and politics, where failure has no real consequences and where success is measured by winning elections rather than creating value. So they fundamentally don't understand how innovation works, how markets work, how technology develops. And when you don't understand these things, your instinct is to control and regulate them because the unknown is scary. That mindset, Musk argued, is exactly what's holding Britain back and exactly what's embodied in Starmer's approach to governance. The interviewer tried one more defence of Starmer, suggesting that his background as a lawyer and as director of public prosecutions showed he understood rule of law and public service. Musk's response was the moment that has now been viewed millions of times. He said that understanding law is not the same as understanding how to build a prosperous, innovative society. Lawyers are trained to find problems, identify risks, and prevent bad outcomes. That's a valuable skill in certain contexts. But running a country in the 21st century requires more than avoiding problems. It requires vision, understanding of technology and economics, willingness to take calculated risks, and ability to attract the talent and investment that drives innovation. Career lawyers and career politicians typically don't have these skills because they've never operated in environments that required them. And then came the line that's being quoted everywhere: your prime minister is not protecting you from harm. He's protecting himself from accountability. And any leader who needs to silence his critics to maintain power is not a leader. He's a tyrant in training. The studio went completely silent. The camera stayed on Musk for what felt like forever, but was probably only 3 or 4 seconds. You could see the interviewer trying to figure out how to respond to such a direct and damning accusation against the Prime Minister. And then Musk continued, not allowing the uncomfortable moment to derail his point. He explained that this observation isn't just about Starmer personally, it's about a pattern across Western democracies where establishment politicians who are losing the only sustainable approach is open debate, where bad ideas are defeated by better ideas, where false information is corrected by accurate information, and where government earns legitimacy through competence rather than demanding it through censorship. The interviewer, to their credit, asked a substantive follow-up question about whether completely unrestricted speech could lead to harm through misinformation or incitement. Musk acknowledged this is a real tension, but argued the solution is not government control of acceptable speech. It's better information, stronger critical thinking skills, and social mechanisms for building reputation and trust. He pointed to how X has implemented community notes, where users collectively fact-check posts and provide context. It's not perfect, but it's a model where the community, rather than government or corporate moderators, decides what additional information would be helpful. That approach respects free speech while providing mechanisms to counter misinformation. It's imperfect, but it's more consistent with democratic values than having government bureaucrats decide what people are allowed to say. The broader political and economic critiques that Musk delivered after establishing his position on free speech were equally devastating to Starmer's government and revealed a systematic analysis that went far beyond simple criticism. Musk turned to economic policy and explained why Britain's current approach is driving away investment and innovation. He pointed out that he makes decisions about where to locate Tesla factories, where to build SpaceX facilities, where to invest in infrastructure based on multiple factors, including regulatory environment, tax structure, availability of skilled workforce, and governmental attitude toward business and innovation. Britain used to compete well on these factors, but it's increasingly losing ground. The reasons, according to Musk, are directly related to policy choices that Starmer's government has made or continued from previous governments. The tax burden on businesses and high earners has increased to levels that make Britain uncompetitive compared to other developed economies. Regulatory complexity has grown to the point where starting and operating businesses requires navigating bureaucratic mazes that waste time and resources. Most critically, the government's attitude toward business has become adversarial rather than cooperative, treating successful companies as problems to be regulated and taxed rather than as sources of jobs, innovation, and prosperity. Musk gave a specific example that has resonated widely. He described considering locations for a new Tesla facility in Europe and ultimately choosing a location outside Britain, despite Britain having advantages in terms of workforce and infrastructure. The decision came down to regulatory predictability and governmental attitude. The country he chose had a government that understood what Tesla was trying to accomplish and wanted to facilitate it. Britain's government, by contrast, seemed to view Tesla as a problem that needed to be managed and controlled. That difference in attitude shapes investment decisions that affect thousands of jobs and billions in economic activity. The interviewer suggested that perhaps Musk was being too harsh and that Britain remains attractive for investment, as evidenced by continued foreign investment flowing in. Musk's response was another devastating moment. He pointed out that much of Britain's recent foreign investment is in mature industries or is buying existing British companies rather than building new ones. The kind of investment that matters most for future prosperity is investment in innovation, in new technologies, in the industries that will define the coming decades.